Right now, as you are watching this, the UK Health Security Agency has just issued a fresh heat health alert across 6 regions of England, running from 9 in the morning on Friday the 24th of July until 9 in the morning on Sunday the 26th, and it caught a lot of people off guard because forecasters had only just told the country the heat was finally over. The third heat wave of the summer had broken down under thunderstorms less than a week earlier, cooler Atlantic air had moved back in, and then the pattern flipped again with almost no warning. This has already been a summer that broke its own warning system. The Met Office issued a red extreme heat warning for 3 consecutive days in June, the first time that has ever happened since the warning system was created. England just recorded its warmest June since records began in 1884. And now, forecasters are watching signs of a 4th heat wave building for the final days of July, with some models showing temperatures climbing back into the low 30s in degrees Celsius by the following weekend. This is the story of a summer that keeps flipping between extreme heat and sudden breakdown. And why the meteorologists tracking it say this specific kind of repeated whiplash, not just the individual temperature records, is the part that should actually worry you. No hype, no exaggeration, just what the data says and why it matters. Drop a comment and tell me how many heat waves you have actually felt where you live this summer. I read every one of these. If you want grounded climate coverage instead of panic headlines, subscribe. It is free, and a like helps this reach more people before the next flip happens. Let us go for 5,000 likes on this one. Thank you. Now let us get into it. This season's first flip happened far earlier than anyone expected. Starting on the 22nd of May, a heat wave settled over the UK that immediately started breaking records for a month that is not supposed to produce them. On the 25th of May, the country's hottest May day on record was broken with a reading of 34.8 degrees Celsius, and the very next day, the 26th, that record was broken again when Kew Gardens hit 35.1 degrees Celsius. That same night produced a tropical night, meaning the temperature never dropped below 20 degrees Celsius even after dark, with a minimum of 21.3 degrees. Celsius recorded at Kenley Airfield itself a new record for the highest minimum temperature ever measured in the UK in May. 15 people died in water-related incidents as people sought relief in rivers, lakes, and the sea during that first wave. Then, just as quickly as it arrived, it broke down, and the country returned to more ordinary conditions. The second flip, in June, is the one that genuinely rewrote the record books. A heat wave built through the middle of the month, and on the 22nd of June, the Met Office issued a red extreme heat warning, its most serious classification, covering parts of central and southern England and Wales, warning that the UK's highest ever temperature for the month of June, 35.6 degrees Celsius, a mark that had stood since 1976 in Southampton and 1957 in Camden Square, was likely to fall. It did, comprehensively. By the 26th of June, more than 150 weather stations across the country, some holding over a century of data, logged their hottest ever June day, and the provisional new national June record reached 37.3 degrees Celsius at Santon Downham in Suffolk. The Met Office issued red extreme heat warnings for 3 consecutive days that week, the first time that specific warning has been issued on 3 straight days since the current warning system began. Met Office Chief Scientist Professor Stephen Belcher described the heat wave as a significant weather event and said, "Human-induced climate change has made events like it more likely and more intense," adding that seeing temperatures like that in the UK in June was, in his words, sobering. The consequences on the ground were immediate. Hospitals in England declared critical incidents as medical equipment and IT systems failed in the heat. Rail lines buckled badly enough that train services had to be suspended in places. The London Ambulance Service recorded its busiest day on record. By the 1st of July, the Met Office confirmed England had just recorded its warmest June since national records began in 1884, with a mean temperature of 17.1 degrees Celsius. The third flip arrived in early July. The Met Office confirmed the UK's third heat wave of the year began on the 4th of July. And unlike the sharp, record-shattering spike in late June, this one was long rather than extreme, a prolonged run of temperatures in the low to mid-30s in degrees Celsius across England and Wales with very little rain to interrupt it. On the 8th of July, the heat pushed emergency services hard enough that a record number of 999 ambulance calls were logged in a single day. Forecasters expected this third wave to hold through much of the following week, peaking around 35 to 36 degrees Celsius by the 16th or 17th of July, before thunderstorms broke the pattern down and cooler air off the Atlantic returned by around the 18th or 19th. That forecast largely held. The heat broke, the country cooled, and coverage at the time openly noted that anything beyond that point in the outlook remained genuinely uncertain, because the atmosphere simply had not decided what it was going to do next. That uncertainty is exactly what produced the flip this video opened with. Instead of settling into a cooler, more typical late July pattern, conditions rebuilt fast enough that the UK Health Security Agency issued a brand new heat health alert covering the East Midlands, the East of England, London, the South East, the South West, and the West Midlands, running from the 24th to the 26th of July, just days after the previous wave had fully broken down. And this is not expected to be the last flip of the summer either. New forecast modeling being discussed this week points to high pressure building back in near the south of the UK toward the end of July, strong enough to block rain-bearing weather fronts from moving in, which meteorologists say could produce as much as a 6-day spell of heat, with temperatures reaching into the low 30s in degrees Celsius by around the 28th of July, and potentially climbing to between 30 and 35 degrees Celsius by the following weekend. East Wales and eastern England are being flagged as the areas most exposed if that pattern holds, while Scotland and Northern Ireland are expected to stay cooler through the initial building phase. That would make it the fourth distinct heatwave of a single UK summer, and it is arriving on top of a country where North Wales and the Upper Severn region are already dealing with drought and dry conditions, meaning any renewed heat lands on ground that has not had time to recover from what came before it. Here's the comparison that actually matters, because a summer that flips this many times is genuinely unusual, even by the standards of recent hot UK summers. In 2022, the year the UK first ever crossed 40 degrees Celsius, the country experienced 3 heat waves across the entire season, one in June, one in July, and one in August, spread out with real recovery time in between each one. 2025 similarly saw a sequence of waves through the summer, with forecasters at one point mapping out where a potential fourth wave might land in August after the third had already swept through in July. 2026 has compressed that same kind of sequence into a tighter, faster rhythm, hitting its first flip in May, a record-shattering second flip in June, a long third flip through most of July, and now a fourth flip forming before July is even finished, each one arriving with less recovery time between episodes than the summers before it. That compression is precisely what strains hospitals, rail infrastructure, and ambulance services the hardest, because none of those systems fully reset before the next wave of demand hits. Now let us talk about why the atmosphere keeps behaving this way, because this is the part meteorologists say matters more than any single day's temperature. Persistent UK heat waves like this one are almost always sustained by a blocking pattern in the jet stream, the fast ribbon of wind-steering weather systems across the Atlantic. When that ribbon buckles into a stalled, hump-shaped pattern that meteorologists call a block, it can trap warm, dry air over the country for days or weeks at a time, instead of letting the normal procession of Atlantic fronts move through and cool things down. What made this particular summer so prone to flipping back and forth is that the block has not stayed locked in place the way it sometimes does in a single weeks-long heat wave. Instead, it has repeatedly broken down just long enough to let a burst of cooler, unsettled weather in, only for high pressure to rebuild again days or weeks later, which is exactly the on-off sequence that produced 4 separate heat waves rather than one long one. Climate attribution research that the Met Office has repeatedly pointed back to throughout this summer, covering past events like the summer of 2018 and July of 2022, has consistently found that human-caused warming makes heat events like these both more likely to occur and more intense once they arrive. None of that research claims that climate change causes any single heat wave to happen on its own. What it does show is that the baseline conditions required for blocking patterns to form and briefly collapse and reform again, warmer background air and a wavier jet stream, are becoming more common, which is part of why forecasters have found this particular summer's pattern so difficult to call more than a week or so in advance. So what does this actually mean for you if you live anywhere in the UK? It does not mean every summer from here forward will flip 4 separate times. It means the specific atmospheric behavior driving this one, a blocking pattern that keeps almost breaking down and then rebuilding rather than settling into one long, predictable heat wave, is becoming a harder pattern for forecasters to give you more than about a week of confident warning on, which is exactly why the alert issued on the 24th of July caught so many people by surprise so soon after they had been told the heat was over. The practical lesson meteorologists are drawing from this season is that treating each heatwave warning as a one-off event, rather than checking in every few days for whether the pattern has reformed, is exactly how people end up caught off guard by a flip like this one. So here is the honest, grounded summary. The UK's 2026 summer has already produced 3 separate heat waves in May, in June, and through most of July consecutive days. For the first time in the warning system's history, gave England its warmest June since 1884 and pushed hospitals, rail networks, and ambulance services to record levels of strain along the way. Just days after the third heat wave broke down and cooler air returned, A fresh heat health alert flipped the country straight back into an active warning on the 24th of July, and forecasters are now watching signs of a potential fourth heat wave building for the final days of the month, landing on ground in Wales already strained by drought. The mechanism behind all of it, a jet stream blocking pattern that keeps almost collapsing and then rebuilding rather than settling into one long heat wave, is exactly why this particular summer keeps catching people off guard, and exactly why meteorologists say the next flip is worth watching for, rather than assuming the heat is finally finished. We will keep tracking this the same way we did today, straight from the Met Office, the UK Health Security Agency, and the meteorologists actually explaining the pattern, not recycled headlines. Subscribe so you do not miss the next flip, because based on what we just walked through, there's a real chance it is already forming. And leave that comment below. Tell me whether the heat where you live has actually let up, or whether it is still hanging on. Because behind every one of these warnings is a hospital ward that just had its equipment fail in the heat, a rail worker checking buckled track in the middle of summer, and a paramedic answering calls on what was, only weeks ago, already the busiest day their service had ever recorded. 5,000 likes on this one. Let us go. See you in the next one.